friends. Welcome to episode 262 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. One of my goals in 2024 is to create a variety of opportunities to showcase as many voices and experiences of school librarians as possible on the podcast. I invite listeners to check out the Have Your Say link in the show notes. You'll find 24 prompts and an open invitation to record yourself. There's never any deadline or cutoff. Rather, this is available to listeners whenever they feel inspired to chime in and share their thoughts on the show. Once you've selected a prompt and decided what you'd like to say, record yourself using your phone and email that file to schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. Your recording will be included in the very next episode. Amanda Jones's upcoming book, That Librarian, will be available starting on August 27th, but you can pre-order your copy now. If you use the indie bookseller Cavalier House Books in Amanda's hometown of Denham Springs, Louisiana, you will get a signed copy. I've included a link in the show notes. When you look at the cover of Amanda's book, you're sure to recognize the Freedom Fighter shirt that she's wearing. She reached out to the designer Christy, who then designed a line of That Librarian apparel, as well as That Librarian flair, such as a bag, sticker, and mug. I love that we can all be that librarian who advocates for our library and our students' access to books. You will find a link in the online store in our show notes. 15% of the proceeds go to support the Texas Library Association, as that is the home state of the designer. It may or may not surprise you that I can pinpoint the day and time I met Amanda Jones and the start of our friendship. I was attending my very first ISTE conference in 2019 in Philadelphia. I made my way to the school library playground, the one session I made sure I didn't miss. I found myself surrounded by school librarians from all over the country showcasing their programs, their innovative lessons, and their practices. With my business cards in hand, I moved from table to table, meeting amazing school library leaders who, until that day, had just been posts I saw on social media. Library leaders like Christina Holzfeis, James Allen, Ashley Cooksey, Joanne Boudreau, Robbie Barber, and yes, Amanda Jones. I might have spoken to each of them for just a few minutes, but that was enough. When you're connecting with school librarians you know will be part of your virtual PLN. If you have a chance to attend ISTE 24 this summer in Denver, consider submitting an application to present at this year's School Library Playground. The deadline has been extended, and it is my all-time favorite part of the ISTE annual conference. For details on how to submit your proposal, see the link in today's show notes. I hope you will join me in our next book club. Jared Amato, creator of Project Lit, has a newly released book. Just Read It, Unlocking the Magic of Independent Reading in Middle and High School Classrooms. I will be sharing discussion questions in the next few weeks on social media and links in future episode show notes. Listeners are welcome to either send in their voicemail responses or join the podcast in recording our conversation to share in an upcoming episode in May. Information is linked in today's show notes. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at @LMS_United. On Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United, and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Be sure to listen to episode 224. I announced a sponsorship with Literati Book Fairs. And now is a chance to hear from one of Literati Book Fair veterans, Kathy. Kathy Edwards, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me again.
You are already expecting a box from Literati. Your book fair is not for another month. Tell me, you get a box in advance. What kind of goodies are coming in this box?
Oh, so many goodies to get me and my kiddos excited about the book fair. I always love seeing it. It's this big, beautiful box. You can't miss it. you know where it's coming from and you know what it's got. And when you open it up, there are all the flyers for your students that you get to send home that advertise the theme for the year and also have all the good books that they're going to sell. And I love opening the box up and taking those out and flipping through it and geeking out over the books and getting excited about it. There's bookmarks in there that you can put out in your library to help get the students excited. Like, oh, it's coming. When's it coming? Look at the bookmark. It'll tell you. There's a sign you can set up that talks about Literati and what Literati does, in addition to the book fairs, the book subscription service that they offer. And I believe that's it, but that's all you need because, and there's posters. Oh my goodness, how can I forget the posters? There's posters. And they have the covers and the characters, and they send you plenty. I think I can hang one on each grade level hallway, one by the front office, one by the cafeteria, and I think one outside my door. So all I have to do is fill in the dates and information for my book fair, but it's got the cool colors and the characters, and it gets the kids' attention and gets them talking about the book fair like a month before it even is set to start.
Well, and that's so important because there are so many demands on our time. So I know that you have to be able to sort of set time aside to promote for this book fair, but tell me, you also probably need to send some of that messaging out on your school social media, correct?
You do indeed. And I'm sure, like other librarians, I am in charge of our school social media and our school website. So I can kind of commandeer that. And through the open book website that Literati provides for you, they have a ton of ready-to-go graphics and Instagram posts and Facebook posts, and that you could just download and plop in and start getting the buzz going for your parents and your families and even your community members. There's stuff to start trying to get volunteers. I mean, anything you think you need to communicate is there for you to just grab and use, and it's tied in with that theme. So there's really besides grabbing it and posting it, that's all you have to do. There's no creating, no nothing that you have to do.
I love it. Kathy, thank you so much for this insight. I know that it's really helpful, especially to anybody who's not hosted a Literati Book Fair. Would you come back one more time and talk with listeners about your experience?
My pleasure.
I appreciate it, Kathy. Tune in to learn all about Literati and their very generous offer. Librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, Inclusive Programming, and my conversation with Stacy Gilbert and Rachel Grover. Friends, we are so lucky. We've got return guests Rachel Grover and Stacy Gilbert. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, everybody. So happy to be here.
You know, friends, this is a real treat. Rachel and Stacy and I met in October. We were at AASL 23 in Tampa, and I attended their session, Finding Their Space, Helping Students Belong in the Library. And then 1 month later, we recorded episode 250, Helping Students Belong. Listeners, you might remember that I put Rachel and Stacy on the spot, literally during our recording, and said, would you please come back for a follow-up episode? So, Stacy and Rachel, you're very understanding, and the fact is, I didn't really give you the option to say no. Yeah, welcome back.
It's really nice to be here. I feel like it wasn't so much, oh no, we were put on the spot and we couldn't say no. It was more like, yay, we get to come back. We get to do this again. Yay.
I think it's going to be fun because, friends, anytime you get creative individuals who are willing to share their ingenuity and their expertise, it really does put a lot of ideas into motion. So let's begin with some introductions. For those who have not heard your first episode, please describe where in the country you work, your current library, the grades, the programs, and your teaching schedule.
All right, well, I will start. I am Stacy Gilbert. I am one of 4 librarians at the same school. We are extremely lucky. It is a grade 7 through 12 school, so we like to say that we have all of the teenagers, literally all of them. And I love every minute of it because teenagers are hilarious and they keep you on your toes. We're fully flexible schedule. It is collaboration with teachers and trying to get kids in the door and loving the space as much as we possibly can, which is part of what we're going to talk about today. I'm also one of the equity leads for my building. Our schools have certain people that are designated as kind of the leaders for equity in the building. And so I'm one of those. I also sponsor our school's GSA, Gender and Sexuality Alliance. I think that's about it.
Awesome. Yes, I just recently got to be on the DEI team too. I'm really excited. I consider that a win. All right. So that's fantastic. I mean, grades 7 through 12. So I think what's fun about that, friends, is today we're going to be talking about programming, inclusive programming, and it's a real opportunity to apply it to your grades. And we're sort of going across many different grade levels. How about you, Rachel? Introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about what you do every day.
So my name is Rachel Grover, and Stacy and I both work right outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. I serve grades 7 and 8 in a middle school where we are majority minority. Our primary ethnicities are Asian and Indian. And I recently won Virginia School Librarian of the Year for 2023. And in December, I certified, so I am National Board Certified Librarian now. Yay! It is a big deal. I also serve on our school's equity committee. We have won an Excellence Award for that a few years ago based on what I did with our staff. But also, I sponsor our makerspace clubs after school, and I also sponsor a student library advisory team after school as well.
Fantastic. I am so grateful to have you here today to share with us all the amazing things you do to make and create inclusivity in your programs. And friends, we'll be sure to include all of Rachel and Stacy's social media in our show notes, especially because we want to make sure that you have every opportunity to see some of this when they do share on social media. Your AASL presentation and episode 250, Helping Students Belong, focused on what we can do with our library policies, our procedures, our spaces, our collections, and the homework we have to do on ourselves so that we make sure that our students feel a sense of belonging. Today, I want to focus on that programming and what you do in your spaces to be intentional and inclusive. As a librarian power couple, I imagine that you have been able to find inspiration and ways to incorporate inclusivity into your library spaces.
Yes, and even though we are both librarians, we are both in the Virginia Association of School Librarians, programming looks very different for our communities just because my population is very different from Stacy's population in terms of everything. The only thing that our children have in common is that some of them are the same age, and they go to the same county schools. That is literally all they have in common. So it's great to be able to brainstorm together and share ideas about different things and then take those ideas and make tweaks for our different clientele. So we may kind of have a basic idea or one of us notices something, but then we form it to make it appropriate for what our kids need.
How about you, Stacy?
Yeah, I completely agree. We do a lot of brainstorming together. One of the problems with being in the same profession as your spouse is that sometimes it can be work all the time. So we definitely have to be careful, but it's also an extreme blessing to be able to have someone in-house that knows what you do, which, my fellow librarians in the house, like no one knows what we do except each other, right? So it's really nice to have someone right there that, to problem solve and, am I the crazy one or is someone else the crazy one? Like that's kind of supportive moments that we need sometimes. But yeah, our populations are so very different. Something I love about my school is that I would argue that my school might be the most diverse in the nation. And diverse, I mean, in the truest sense of every a subset of American experiences are in my school. So how it looks for my kids might be completely different than how it looks for Rachel's kids. But we can still bounce off each other and give each other ideas and have a starting point that then we can branch off and make sure it works for our kids.
So friends, I'm just going to tell you right now that if I had somebody at home who wanted to hear about me talking about my job, at the end of the day, this podcast would not exist. I'm going to tell you right now that my partner in life at one point said out loud, "Isn't there somebody else you can talk to?" And friends, we're all flawed in some way. But when your life partner says, "I really don't want to hear you talk about work ever again," all of a sudden you really start to do the wheels start turning. And this podcast is very much a product of the need for me to be able to work through things in a long form, meaning I want to be able to work through these ideas and feel like I have been able to pull on the expertise of fellow school librarians. P.S. None of them work anywhere near I do. And we're just going to have this conversation and find ways to reach solutions that we can all benefit because we have pressed record and shared this conversation out. And again, if I had a partner or a spouse who wanted to hear me talk about my library, I probably wouldn't have bothered with a podcast. But such as it is, you'll be able to make lemonade out of lemons. He's a very nice person. We just don't talk about my work. And that's fine. Plenty of other things to do.
He has a really great personality.
Oh, yeah. He's real nice. And we got plenty of things to talk about. We're raising 3 adult children right now. And so there's no shortage of things to talk about. But if I want to, for 1 minute, talk about work, first of all, I do have Clubhouse on Sundays at 7 p.m. Casey Boyd, Boss Librarian and Friends, Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But these conversations with school librarians is what helps me be better at my job and better understand what I have to deal with every day because I'm talking to people who have some idea of what it's like to do this job, at least from their perspective. So thank you so much for being part of the solution, friends.
Well, you're welcome.
It really is a team effort here. Rachel, can you break down how this conversation's going to go? Because I said, hey, let's talk about inclusive programming, and you guys took it to the next level.
Well, that's what we do. We always have to be extra. That's just how we are. But when we were sitting down to plan this outline, we really just brainstormed all of the program that we do that is inclusive in some way. And we said, this is not organized at all. And I am a type A, has to be organized, has to have some kind of structure in some way. So we wanted to just clarify that when we talk about programming, it could be anything, right? But programming is active programming that you do with your kids, like almost like an event. Everybody, it happens at the same time. Another one is passive programming. That's like when you stick something out and it's like, vote for your favorite, whatever it is. And you just let it sit there. You may promote it, maybe not, but it kind of sits there and the kids kind of interact with it as they want to. But then a lot of us also have digital programming, things that happen online only that you may promote, but it's really for the kids to access at their schedule and maybe when they are in the library or when they're not in the library, kind of at their own time. And then also programming can be instruction too, because instruction is part of our library program. Our library program is everything we do. So we really wanted to make sure that we addressed some ideas for active programming, some ideas for passive programming, some for digital, and some for instruction as well.
And to go along with that, we also want to kind of put out there what the inclusive part of inclusive programming means, right? Like, inclusive doesn't just mean I did something for Black History Month, right? I put up a bulletin board or, something along that nature. Inclusive is really a constant mindset. It's constantly looking at, who am I missing? Who is not being addressed with my current library program? What students can benefit from some additional outreach, or need an outlet for whatever. So like I said, it's really a mindset of trying to help our libraries be everything that it can for as many students as we possibly can hit. And so that's the most important part of the inclusive part of inclusive programming, is that it's not just a one thing. It's not a checkbox. I did this one thing this one time, so therefore I'm being inclusive. It is a mindset and a constant learning process and a constant effort to make sure that our libraries are reaching everyone that we possibly can reach.
Well, and I think about, so many of us were traditional classroom teachers before we became school librarians, and it's not hard to keep track of the students we're responsible for because we have an actual, we have an attendance sheet, and you have to, be mindful of making sure you're taking care of all your students' needs, including the ones who aren't in school that day. But it is a finite list. It is something that you can hold and control. But when you look at what we have in terms of our responsibility to our school community writ large, they're all our students. Whether they come to the library or not, there is a responsibility that we carry. And by the way, all the teachers, we support the teachers, whether they actively come and seek us out or they hold themselves in their rooms and they're fine. And it's a matter of email exchanges. But regardless, they're all our responsibility. So let's dive into our inclusive programming that you would like to showcase today. We're going to start off right now with our passive programming that is inclusive.
So I have been a librarian at my school for 10 years now. I have been through renovation. I have been through change of principal multiple times, all the things. If anything can happen, with change of community, I have had it happen. And so one of the things that I used to do was I used to offer service learning hours or community service hours for students to do their own student book display. So I would have shelves that kids could come and do their own things. However, I realized it was kind of restrictive because it was really only offered to kids that needed the service hours, and it wasn't giving everybody a chance. So I decided to not do that anymore. I don't offer that anymore. And instead, I have a display in my library. It's a Demco tower display. There's a couple of shelves to it. And I put easels on it, just the book display easels. And there's a sign at the top that says, if you really like a book, put the book on the display. It doesn't ask for a sticky note. It doesn't ask for a book summary. It doesn't ask for rate the stars. It's just, if you think it's good, put it on. And if you see an empty one, please feel free to put something on there. And Amy, I cannot tell you how much of a success it was this year. And because it's different levels, different rows of books, students come and pick them. And I have 7 displays, Amy. I'm really fortunate to have a lot of display space, but it is by far the most consulted. Kids look at it all the time. And the books change. Every time I look, the books are different. And I'm not doing anything with it. And it really gives any kid a chance to put books on display and recommend them for the rest of their student community. And teachers will come in and students will come in, and it's everything. It's graphic novels, it's manga, it's, the first or the last of a series. And so it really is inclusive in that it allows anybody in the school community, and there's no real responsibility to go with it, right? There's no, you have to turn anything in. There's no something else to follow up with. It's just, hey, if this is what you like, then, I really liked this one. Now, the biggest thing I have is sometimes kids will say, can you check this in so I can put it on the display? because sometimes they like it so much they put it on the display without returning it. So that is the only issue, but it changes all the time. Kids now know to go to that display, and it's completely student dictated. I don't have to do anything with that display, and it's truly inclusive because anybody in the school community can do it.
I really love that, because all of a sudden you've got kids who, might not want to write a little blurb if you gave them a 3x5 card. They don't want to write about it. The students value each other's recommendations far more. It does not matter that I'm a librarian. It doesn't matter that I went to graduate school. The fact is, they're going to value the recommendations of their peers far more than anything I have to say. And forgive me, but that also goes for their teachers, because they just want to read what their friends are reading. And this is one way to make sure that happens. You've sort of lowered the bar. There is no bar. There's all of a sudden, you want to recommend a book? We value that. That's absolutely fantastic. What else is it that you have found a way to create this inclusive environment in your space?
So I am not a fan of awkward silence. And ever since I've been a librarian, we've always had music of some kind going. It's always instrumental. And when I first started, I had a co-librarian who played classical. That's all he played was classical. And that was great. And then I started to learn the tunes and they got stuck in my head. And that was not so much. And I was realizing that a lot of our kids didn't really recognize the songs. So I started to do instrumentals of popular songs, which the kids would give you that bass, like, I know this song. I'm supposed to know the song, right? And it was nice because kids saw the recognition in what was being played. And the kids knew that every time they came in, something different was being played. So a lot of kids would come in just to see what was being played. But then in the last couple of years, I really took it a step further. And now our instrumental is reflective of their home countries. So we have some sub-Saharan Africa instrumental. We have Indian, we have Bollywood music. We have classic Japanese. We have, Native American flute. We have, all of these things. And I actually had a student come to me and say, Ms. Greber, I haven't heard this song since I was back in India last summer. And I was really surprised to hear this song. And it was great because he kind of felt like he was represented in my library. And I didn't do anything else except play music that was inclusive and representative of his experience.
Oh, that's so much fun. Now, somebody's going to want me to ask you this. When you say I play music, is this during your checkout time? Is this during before school, after school lunch? Or how is, and when is it that you are playing music? Because clearly that isn't there are times when this happens.
So the music turns on when I turn on the lights in the morning, and the music turns off when I turn the lights off when I go to leave. It is on all the time. So you can hear it anytime you are there for the first thing in the morning, or if you come in for, to check out, or you come in at the end of the day to start your club. It's on all the time.
And you know what? I imagine if you were, forgive me, but if you weren't there, they'd be like, oh, where's the music?
It's awkward silence. Like when I haven't been there and there's been a sub, the kids were like, thank God you're back, because it's weird when there's no music.
I think that's fantastic. Stacy, tell us, what do you do? What are some of your passive programs which help your students feel included?
Well, my favorite one, I know I got the idea from social media somewhere, and whoever first posted this, I'm sorry, I don't remember your original post, but thank you for sharing. But they pre-COVID, and it was just this, hey, I do a would you rather voting in my library. And so I decided to put it in MySpace and see what happened. And it became, or has become, the most popular aspect of our library. Kids will come in during class change just to run in and see what that week's would you rather question is and vote real quick. We have a little bin of pom-poms that were, was it like 300 for $2 or something on Amazon. And they just take a pom-pom and they move it to whichever container, holds, their choice. And then they run out. And when we do the elementary school visits, I don't know if other librarians, have this also happen in their space, but where the, incoming students do the tours kind of in the winter, spring of the previous year, right? Just, so they have the lay of the land. They come in the library and we have student tour guides. So there are students who are tasked with taking these groups around, and they have a script. But it's hilarious to watch how many of the kids go off script. And the thing most common that they go off script about when they come in the library is would you rather. They explain would you rather. Sometimes they have the group vote, and they vote with the incoming kids. It is the most adorable thing. And we try to make sure that we change the questions every week. The students would really prefer if I changed it more often than that. But I'm trying to tell them, children, I don't have that many questions. I can't do that for you. I'm sorry. So we do it once a week. But we try to do a variety of types of questions, right? So there are really deep thinking questions. Would you rather eliminate world poverty or eliminate world hunger? But we also have, would you rather have to wear pickles for shoes or have an ear that's a banana, right? Like, I mean, just a silly, would you rather have a pocket full of pudding? Or, those just like ridiculous, funny, goofy things, and everything in between, so that you hit different types of kids, you hit different interests of kids with these different questions, and also being really careful not to fall into the pit of accidental ableism or accidental culturalism or something that you wouldn't want to inadvertently offend a kid or discriminate against a kid with these questions. Because when you do a search for, I need some ideas for would you rather questions, not all of those are with all students in mind. And so you have to be very careful about which questions you choose and why. But we are very intentional about what we're choosing and that we're getting a good variety of kid interests and kid experiences and good thinking questions, but also just silly, fun questions. And I'm telling you, it is by far the most popular aspect of my library.
I love that it's absolutely no tech involved. Let's keep this real simple. I wanted to call it harmless fun. It doesn't require any sort of technology. So this is something that could be easily done with a couple mason jars and a dry erase board and some, cheapy pom-poms. I've also seen it done with buttons. You do want to make sure you don't give kids something they get really attached to, or else you'll find yourself running out of things.
I completely forgot to mention where it is in the library, and that actually is kind of an important component of it. We originally put it on the top of one of our shelves. It's like a 3-shelfer, so it's about chest height on me, and I'm a relatively shortish person. So it was really good sight lines. When you first walked into the library, it was the first shelf when you first walked in. It was kind of like bam, hit you right eye level, and then we realized we have quite a few kids that is not eye level. I mean, we have, beginning of the year 7th graders that's not eye level for some of them. We have some little people who are students. We have some people that use wheelchairs. We have, so all of these kinds of other things, we realize, oh my gosh, this is not, if this is going to be a permanent fixture of our library, we can't leave it here. And so we specifically moved it. It's not as close to the front door, which is a little bit of a womp womp. But luckily enough, kind of excitement was built around it that when we moved it, it wasn't a huge detriment. But we moved it down. We had a shelf that's more like a 2-shelfer. And so that is where it goes now. Now everyone can reach it. And even though it's not eye level, it is still, or not eye level for a lot of our students, it is still very accessible to everyone. And it is near a pole. Then now I put multiple signs at different heights. Then would you rather with an arrow? So that hopefully the pole will get you if you didn't see the display. So I wanted to make sure to mention that was also part of that inclusion for would you rather, is making sure the location worked.
So, I'm curious because, Stacy, you also include music in your programming that is also inclusive.
Yes. So we very intentionally also try to reach out to our music groups in the building. And so periodically we host the choir, we host the orchestra, we host little, some of the performing groups in the library, usually during lunches, because lunch is by far our most popular time, which I'm sure many other libraries, especially high school libraries, can commiserate. But just every once in a while to have these music groups in, so it gives the kids a chance to perform for their peers, which at my school, there isn't an opportunity for that unless you come to the evening big concert for all the families, right? There's not kind of an in-school opportunity for that usually. And lets the other students have a moment to see their peers and what they're excelling at and their passion. And, we don't often get to highlight music kids in the library. And so I really love having that opportunity for them. I am slowly trying to convince the rest of my team that we need to do more of what Rachel's describing and having some music playing throughout the day. It is a slow roll. I am in year 6 at my library and I'm still working on it. But we all know library is a long game, right? So we're in the long game for that. But I really appreciate when we're able to highlight the music students and their excellence in the library.
Yes, friends, it is a marathon, not a sprint. So we are in this for the long run, and everything we do either requires money or time or both. And sometimes when you have colleagues who you share that space with, all of a sudden you have there's a campaign of we've got to all be on a similar wavelength when it comes to our priorities and our teaching styles. So let's go ahead and start to talk a little bit about some active programming that you both do in your spaces to create that inclusivity in your spaces. How about we start with you, Rachel?
One of the things that we did recently in November was we did a Dino-vember. So a lot of people do like dinosaurs in November. So Dino-November, Dino-vember. And this was something that my student library advisory team really wanted to do. They planned all the things. I offered service hours to a student who came in her inflatable dino costume in the morning before school started. We were super popular in the morning. We typically do between 100 and 130 students before school starts. And she volunteered twice to come before school and inflate her dino costume and walk around. And the kids took pictures, and we hid these little mini dino eggs that we got from Amazon, and there was a couple every day. It was a whole thing, except I know that there were some students in our autism room that are obsessed with dinosaurs, because I know that because I had to specifically revamp my dino selection that I did not have when they came, because they love dinosaur books. So I could not let Dino-vember go by without really acknowledging them and including them in some way, because they don't come in first thing in the morning, because they didn't have the opportunities to do some of this programming that my student library team wanted to do. So what I did with them was I got a really cute dinosaur storybook from a friend of mine who's an elementary librarian, and I arranged it with the teacher of the autism students that they came for their own story time. We had dino stomping happening. We stomped around the library. And then afterwards, they had a coloring activity where they could pick what dino coloring page they wanted, and they could color it. So they got to make the choice of what colors and what dinosaur. So they still got to participate in Dino-vember. It was just modified a little bit to include them. And I'm telling you, they still talk about it. Like, they will look at me and point and go, dinosaur, like, because they remember. And so knowing those things about your community and making sure that you acknowledge everybody, even in your big programming, is so special. Even it did not take very long. It was like a 30-minute thing. And so we had a story and a coloring thing, but I'm telling you, it made their days. You should have seen the look on their face. And that is what inclusive programming is to me, to really acknowledge that every kid wants to be able to interact with your library in a way that's best for them.
I love that. How about your makerspace? And tell us, what have you done to make sure that your makerspace is also inclusive?
So I am in a very fortunate position that several years ago, when we were in the middle of renovation, which is its own story, a local nonprofit organization approached us and wanted to give us a $60,000 grant for our makerspace. They knew that we were in the middle of renovation. They knew that our new library was going to have a computer lab that we did not need because the students all had their laptops by then. And so they knew we were going to have a makerspace. And they had also just funded a makerspace at the high school. So the idea was that kids would get makerspace stuff like throughout the community. They wanted to make sure that they outfitted the elementary schools as well. So now it's a whole thing. But anyway, so when I was given this check, it is a blessing and a curse to be given that much money because it really does make your mind blow. We really considered the flow. We considered accessibility. We have students who are in wheelchairs. We have students who, like I said, we have an autism class, and I wanted to make sure this room was accessible to everybody. So we have tall tables and short tables, but we also have a lot of kids now that come only for our makerspace clubs. They're not readers. They don't come to my library first thing in the morning. But my goodness, whenever I have a makerspace program or a makerspace club, they are there. And so just by offering makerspace things and makerspace activities, it's giving kids a reason to be in my library that isn't necessarily reading focused. And believe it or not, most of my kids that come for the makerspace clubs are our self-contained special needs students. It's not like our autism kids, but they're the like inclusion kind of kids, the students that do have learning disabilities, but they really have found a home with each other and in this space. So it's really a great way to kind of offer the same kind of questioning and critical thinking and developing of all the skills that we teach at other places of the library, also in this space. So it just includes those kids that aren't necessarily readers, but in a different way.
That's so wonderful. I mean, I have to ask, so you had corporate sponsorship. Was there an expectation that there would be some sort of acknowledgement of the generous donation that had been received by your program? I imagine that the corporation would like to have some visibility so that the families can be grateful.
Yeah, it wasn't really corporate. It was more a nonprofit that really focuses on education, and they fundraise specifically to give back to the schools in the area. So we had the students name our makerspace, and then underneath the logo on the front window, it says sponsored by and the name of the nonprofit.
Excellent, excellent. So how about you, Stacy? What are some things that you have done to actively create inclusion in your programming so that all your students feel included?
Well, I love doing active programming so much. This year, our abilities to do active programming during the school day has been basically brought to nothing, which is very sad. But we have been able to continue some things at kind of different times of the day. And my absolute favorite that has become an annual tradition at my school is Franken Toys. I advertise it as be Sid from Toy Story. And so I go to the dollar store and I just fill my cart. The poor cashier looks at me every year like I must be some kind of serial killer or something because my cart is just filled with all of the soft toys I possibly can. I go down the dog toy aisle too. There's some anyone who wants to do this, just so you know, dog toys are a really good source for this as well. But anyway, so get a bunch of soft toys or toys that can be easily broken up, and we give them scissors and markers and a lot of hot glue. There's a lot of hot glue that happens with these. And some googly eyes. They really love googly eyes. And the students just have a ball. It really gives a place for those kids who, the horror readers or the kids that are really into horror movies. This gives them a place because they take these creations to a place that as a non-horror reader, watcher, would never have imagined. But now when I buy supplies, I am specific. I know they're going to want something that might suggest blood or something that maybe could be used for entrails. And it's just, they're teenagers. And so sometimes they take this to this like very kind of gory place. And sometimes they're very adorable little creations. And they just have so much fun. It is so open-ended and so respectful of wherever that kid individually is and what they want to make. But it also gives an outlet to those kids that I feel like don't often get an outlet in school. There's not a whole lot of places for that, little dark, maybe a little twisted, to have an outlet in school and it be okay and it to be celebrated. And so it is a lot of fun. Like I said, it's become an annual tradition.
So, Stacy, I have to ask, because there are people scratching their heads going, wait a minute. Do you dismember these items prior to the students, or do the students get to disarticulate these sort of, I'm thinking about like Wacky Barbie. Is that what she was called in the movie? Yeah, sort of like a Wacky Barbie. Do you disassemble and detach these tear these things limb from limb, or do you let the students do that? Because I do remember, I believe I was talking to Amanda Chacon, who did a prosthesis in her makerspace, where you would create a prosthesis for these stuffies, and these stuffies would get new sort of appendages so that they yes. And so let me ask you: do you take these items apart, or are you letting the students sort of have at it, much like you said, Sid from Toy Story?
Oh, they have at it. They get to choose any 2 toys. And then we have kind of pieces of other toys that from years past that have not been used, that they can use as additional parts. I also tell them they can swap with other students at their table. If, anyone have an eyeball. There definitely was one year that a kid was kind of, was loudly asking for anyone in the room, anyone have a leg he could borrow? And that was a great moment. But they have so much fun cutting the heads off these things. And we have seam rippers. So sometimes they're being very careful and individually breaking each little thread. But most of the time it's just, I wonder if I can pull the arm off this thing. And it's very entertaining. We end up with a lot of stuffing everywhere. But it is great fun.
I'm fascinated. Now I'm wondering, it would be an opportunity to introduce things like a needle and thread, like some basic sewing skills as well. And I know there's some places that have been able to bring in sewing machines, but it really does call upon a myriad of skills that really would allow kids to use that as an artistic expression in a way that is encouraged and is supported. And yes, it's a little twisted. So let's hear also about your author visits.
So we have a very, very limited budget for anything other than books. Our district is very, very kind to us when it comes to book budgets, which we talked about in the previous episode. So if you're curious, you can go back and maybe be a little jealous if you're not in a similar situation. But for our book budgets are very healthy and supportive. We are very appreciative. My school, the budget for everything else is very limited. So like author visits and tape, all of those things can get very limited. But last year we had our list of kind of school list of books that we were highlighting, right? Where, maybe you have a state book list that in your library you highlight those particular books, or maybe you always highlight the award winners from the previous year or something like that. We have a school specific list that we come up with, and so there was a book on there by Huda Fahmy, who did Huda FRU, and she just came out with Huda F Cares, and we fell in love with her books. We have to put this on our list. And so when we started talking about, what can we do, like, oh, I wonder if we could get Huda to come and do an author visit. And so we we have, our budget is almost no dollars. Let's see, the odds are low, but let's see. So we reached out to her, and she was willing to do a virtual visit because she needs to be home with a small child, or she did at the time. And so we're like, and she was willing to do it for a very reasonable amount of money for us. So yes, please. So we partnered up with the ESOL classes. The ESOL classes read all of her books. They did this huge book study or author study on her and all of her works. And oh my gosh, did those kids show up for that author visit. And then at the end of the year, when the kids got to vote for what was their favorite book of the year, oh my gosh, Huda FRU was, it was like far and beyond the winner for the year. Also because it's a great book, but also because, it was with the passion of these ESOL students who had studied all of her books and absolutely loved her. And we're in a very unique position. Well, maybe not unique, but I guess less common position that our ESOL students speak a wide variety of languages. It is not predominantly any one language. And so these are kids from literally all over the world who all connected to her books and what it means to feel like an outsider. And it was absolutely amazing. It was a great experience, and it was great to have that connection with those ESOL students so they felt seen through our library and through something that we did too.
So friends, a Michigan connection here. Huda Fahmy is she writes about her experience growing up in Metro Detroit. Metro Detroit is home to the largest Arab community outside of the Middle East. And her books, specifically Huda FRU and Huda F Cares, these are fantastic, but all about being in a school situation, wearing a hijab, and really sort of wrestling with what others think and trying to navigate those tumultuous waters. But doing a virtual author visit is going to resonate with students because that is truly, when you think about it, our students are so communicative through screens. Having your guest author come in through screens may seem limiting to you and to me, but to this generation of learners, putting them on a screen, there really isn't anything remote about it. They are very tuned in and connect very well with the screen. So I think this is an absolute win. I love that.
Oh, and she was so wonderful. So if anyone has the opportunity to get her to come to your schools, yes, please do so. She's wonderful.
Well, and so tell me also about Pi Day, as in March 14th, 3.14 is oftentimes celebrated in schools. But how did you make this inclusive?
All right. So I was, in my previous pre-library life, a classroom math teacher. So I always am trying to find ways to incorporate math and computational thinking. And, our entire school communities need to be supported by the library, right? So how are we reaching out to those math kids that maybe don't see themselves as readers, or they're not maybe as strong in their language skills, but they're very strong in their math skills? Like how are we supporting them and making them feel like they belong and are an integral part of our communities as well, right? So I love doing and literally anything for Pi Day because as a classroom teacher, I never had time to think about and plan something for Pi Day. Every single year, I would blink and, oh no, tomorrow's Pi Day and it's too late to plan anything. And oh, well, we have that test coming up anyway. But in the library, we can have a little bit more time sometimes to plan and think about these things. So yes, it is March 14th, 3.14 for Pi. It is also Albert Einstein's birthday, in case, so it's like doubly mathy nerdy, which is excellent. Yes, Albert Einstein was born on Pi Day, which I don't know how the universe converged to make that happen, but it's amazing. So every year we host an activity with breakout, or we do a digital kind of breakout escape room kind of situation centered around Pi Day. And it's Albert Einstein's birthday. He's having a party. He sends a note. You have to find him, blah, 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 blah. And they have to figure out all these puzzles in order to find Albert Einstein on his birthday. And so it is great fun. And we purposely build the puzzles so that all of our grade levels can access it, which can also be difficult when you're talking about math puzzles, right? How can self-contained Math 7 access it at the same level that our AP Calculus students can? And so it definitely is a constant fight and tweaking and making sure that everything can be accessible for everyone, but also that those math kids feel like they have a place in our library and we're going to celebrate them and their passions as well.
I think that's so clever because especially as a former math teacher, you are able to pull on strengths which would be rather unique to your team. An interesting addition. My library assistant is a retired math teacher. And so it has created a very well-rounded source of support when people come into our space because we have a resident math expert. I'm very grateful. So let's talk about some digital inclusive programs. Rachel, kick us off and tell us what are some things that you do that build some inclusivity in your program, but it's done through media and it's done through a digital format.
I really hold the belief that if you're going to truly be inclusive, you have to meet kids where they are and meet them in the places where they can approach the library on their own terms. And there are some students who are reading a verse and through no method of our own will not come into the library or very rarely come into the library. And most school communities have a learning management system. Maybe it's Blackboard or it's Canvas. We have Schoology. There's a whole bunch of other ones. And so the classrooms have a digital presence, and usually the library has a digital presence as well. And one of the things that we have done is do something called Question of the Week. And we have a discussion board format where I can post a discussion board question. And I ask one every week on Wednesdays. If I don't post it, the kids will remind me to post it. And it's kind of our version of Stacy's like, would you rather, except it's more open-ended. So sometimes we'll say like, would you rather live in the rainforest or would you rather live on the North Pole and why? And the kids have to give a rationale. Recently, it was the beginning of a new semester, so kids' electives changed. We had a question that was, what class should be offered that isn't offered at our school? And so it gives them really innovative ways to be thinking about on-topic school things, but it's also letting them post when they want to. Sometimes kids are posting when they're done with work in class. Sometimes kids are posting at 11 o'clock at night. Sometimes kids are posting on the weekend. And it's letting them experience and interact with the library on their own terms. And so for me, that's inclusive because it's not just when the library is open and you have to come to the library to experience the programming, but it's really expanding and getting rid of those library walls and meeting them in the places that they are most comfortable with. So Question of the Week is super popular, and we do all kinds of different questions with it.
I do have to ask, do you moderate the responses before they go?
Yes.
So you do watch them before they go live?
So yes, I get an email with every single response. And so I kind of pay attention in my email. I do block out time, especially right after I post it. And so I watch. It will blow my email up. But I want to make sure that no person feels excluded. I want to make sure no bullying happens. And also every staff member has access to my library as well. And so I want to make sure that it is a safe, welcoming place. And students know that. I will say at the beginning of the year, in like the folder description of Question of the Week, it says, if your comments don't further the discussion, then they will be deleted. And so there are students that I watch for, but for the most part, once the kids have kind of gotten past the first couple of weeks, it really does settle down and it's very respectful.
I love that. And it's a very authentic It's a skill that needs to be honed and developed, because this is more and more increasingly how students communicate is online, and they need to know that there's a certain decorum when it comes to communicating online. Let's hear some more about your digital inclusive programming.
Something I'm really proud of is our virtual makerspace that I cannot share in the show notes because it is in our walled garden and only our students can access it. That's just how it is. I apologize. But I have really compiled a lot of sites where students can still make and create, and it gives them a chance to still make. A lot of kids, like we said, are on screens, and it's still giving them that ability to create something that did not exist before. But it is available on our learning management system so that students can access it at a time that's best for them. Our makerspace clubs are so popular that we have to have caps and limits on who can come. And so to make making accessible for everyone, I created this virtual makerspace so that everybody has the opportunity to still make, even if they can't come into the library for it for one reason or another. The other thing is we do Fall Candy Madness in October, and Stacy does something very similar because we both know in October that the only thing on teenagers' minds is candy, because a lot of students, not all of them, but a lot of students celebrate Halloween. More and more of our community does not celebrate Halloween, so we do nothing Halloween related in our library for a lot of other reasons, but we do Fall Candy Madness, which is similar to March Madness, but we do it as a Google form. So it's definitely brackets, and we pick like 16 candies that are like, and there's different categories. So there's nutty, and there's just sugar, and there's the caramel, and there's the whatever it is. And we print out the images of the candies, and we make a for real bracket. And well, for me, it's in my windows. And so it's done over the 4 weeks of October, and students vote in a Google form. Staff votes too. And something I like is that every single bracket question is optional. So if kids don't eat that candy, or they're allergic, or whatever the case might be, or they're halal and it's gelatin, that they can vote on the things that they eat. Our staff can vote as well. It is by far our most popular program, by far. And every Monday, I will update the brackets so that conveniently, just before Halloween, we are able to release like Rocky Run's favorite candy. And so it goes in the yearbook. It's all of our windows. It's a thing, but it's only posted in our LMS page. They have to go to our LMS page to get the link to vote. And so I post the results there, but I also post them in our windows. So kids are talking, teachers are talking. It's great for critical thinking. It's great for like prediction, what you think is going to happen. And this year we actually did a staff pool that staff could predict, a lot like, the basketball pools and whatever. And we gave prizes to staff that picked for the different rounds. It was so fun. It's inclusive in a couple ways. Number one, it does not acknowledge Halloween at all. Number two, it acknowledges that kids are thinking about candy. Number three, it includes all students and all staff. And so it really acknowledges that library is so much more than books. And a lot of people think that we are just books. This has nothing to do with books, but it's hitting the same skills that I teach in our makerspace, that I teach in a whole bunch of other activities. It's just talking about candy.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I agree. In my school, we have Jehovah's Witnesses. And so the objection is, that they don't do Halloween. And for some of our families, they would, especially in elementary, they would simply pull their kids the week of Halloween. Like the kid didn't go to school that week. And that was something that they did because it really was the only way they could be sure that they were not going to have their child feel at all excluded. And therefore it was just, that's the week they're going to go to Disney World because they're not going to celebrate Halloween. And, I for lots of reasons, friends, but I love this idea of also including the staff. because I think that sometimes we forget, it's so important to remember that they are also our audience, are the people that we support. I think that's wonderful. Okay, let's go ahead. How about you, Stacy? You've got digital components to your program that you always prepare to make sure that your students feel included in your programming.
Yeah, so we do, similar to Rachel's Fall Candy Madness, we call it Candy Face Off, but very similar. That is one that even though we have such different populations and communities that, all teenagers are thinking about candy. And so we both also try to incorporate that little math component with the graphs of the results. How many people chose this candy over this candy, and Google Forms, make all those graphs for you. And so it's another way to incorporate some of that math. And that's, as previously stated, very close to my heart. Another digital thing that we did, so we love getting feedback from the kids. And at the end of every year, we do a big kind of feedback form. What did you like this year? What would you like to see next year? Trying to get as much feedback as we possibly can in our planning for the upcoming year. And one year, a student wrote in the final comments, anything else you want us to know kind of section, that, well, I know we can't have a real library cat, but could we get a stuffed library cat that we name? And my first thought was, why, yes, we can. So that summer, I went on Amazon. I found us a cat that was vaguely orange because that's our main school color. And so the next year, we did a big digital push for let's name our new library cat. And so the students gave ideas, and then we narrowed them down. The whole staff and students got to vote. And so we have Sir Ginger Buns the Fourth, otherwise known as Ginger, who sits on the circulation desk. And we have students who will come in and just give Ginger a little pat on the head and then run off to class. And he helps us out with various digital marketing and information things. Before there's a big break, sometimes we will do a whole photo shoot with Sir Ginger, showing what his plans are for whatever break. There was one that we tried to take it to a whole meta place. I'm not sure how well the kids got it, but about influencer culture and how he wanted to show how great his break was. And then we took pictures of him with just little paper outfits or paper hats. And then he just realized that it was better just to be honest about his break. And the last picture was him under a blanket. So the idea of just be honest and your real plans are great. It's a lot of fun and the kids get really into it. And my favorite thing about it is that it was so inclusive because it was 100% kid initiated. And it was a suggestion from one kid that then everyone got to be in on, and now is everyone's library cat. And to this day, I don't know which kid suggested that. Our feedback is anonymous. So somewhere out there is some student that I hope feels very seen, that this was a thing that they suggested, and so now it's a thing that exists. And like I said, the kids are really into it.
Well, and I do like this idea that you've got, Sir Ginger Buns, who would perhaps have some ideas of their own. Some messaging coming from the Learning Commons or your library could come from Sir Ginger Buns. It's not you. It's, I'm sorry. I'm just the messenger. Stacy, I'm so curious. Choose your own adventure, but you're doing this digitally. And now I have to ask, because Choose Your Own Adventure books were some of the most popular books I had. But tell me, how do you incorporate this into your programming, but it's done in a digital way?
It was something we did as part of School Library Month last year. And it all came about because Choose Your Own Adventure books are kind of coming back. They're trying to update them and make a kind of new timeline of them. There's a reboot of choose your own adventure books, but I loved them so much as a kid. I was obsessed with all the choose your own adventure books. And so we got to wondering, I wonder if the kids would be interested in having their own kind of choose your own adventure. So what we did was we posted the beginning of the story on our LMS, and there's the ability to do a poll when you post. So we did a poll that was the choices, right? If you would go in the cave, vote here. If you would swim out to sea, pick this one, right? And voting was for the whole week. At the end of the week, posted, all right, you chose to go in the cave. And we wrote the next part of the story about what happens when you go in the cave. And it was hilarious. It was the most engagement we've had online. It was very low stakes. The portions of the story were very short and used very simple language to be as accessible as possible. And it was much more popular than I had even hoped. So it's definitely something we are going to do again for School Library Month. But I loved that it was a communal literacy experience, right? We're all connecting over this story. There were teachers who read it aloud to their class each week, and they voted as a class, which option that should happen. And so it was a really nice kind of community building around a story. And that doesn't often happen in a lot of schools, including mine.
Can I ask, start to finish, how long did your Choose Your Own Adventure activity last in your school?
Oh, it was just for the month of April. So it was just for School Library Month.
And how long would you put new choices out on a, 3 times a week or twice? How often did you put those out to the community?
I think I said a second ago that it was once a week, but I don't actually think that was true. Now that I think about it, I think we did it every other day.
So, friends, I have been sponsored by Capstone for years, and Capstone has the lock on these Choose Your Own Adventure books. And friends, I will include a link in the show notes. You will always get a discount if you use the code UNITED, $20 off an order of $100 or more. And yes, just order, $100 at a time, and you get that $20 off. Friends, as a history teacher here, I bought the history ones just because those were sort of like gateway books for my students. Those are very much gateway books for my students. But the fact is that this is a wildly popular, I kept everything in its own section because the kids would want to read all the books in that series of Choose Your Own Adventure. So sorry, shameless plug, but Capstone's been fantastic in supporting me, and I'm just grateful.
Well, and just kind of to put this out there also, when I first started thinking about doing this program, I went back and got some of the old Choose Your Own Adventure books that I grew up with. And I'm looking through them and like, oh, this is going to be great. And then I realized that they were written at a different time. Let's put it that way, right? They are not, a lot of them were not written with an idea of cultural responsiveness and respect for other cultures and all of that. So just a warning out there that if now you want to go back and, maybe check out some of these sounding like lovely titles from Capstone as opposed to some of the classics. Let's just say some of them don't age well.
So let's shift gears and finally, let's talk about inclusivity when it comes to the instruction that we provide for our students. Rachel, kick us off. What kinds of things do you do in your instruction that really builds that sense of inclusivity?
Well, I always feel like, equity and inclusivity is the plate of what we do. It is not one more thing to consider. It is the thing. And how do we make it so that every kid feels like anything the library touches is accessible and approachable in whatever way that is? I really have made it my goal to infiltrate everything I do with that kind of perspective. One of the things I do is, especially when I am consulted on a research project, I really look at the list to see what is being offered. A librarian professor of mine would call it a bird project, where everybody got a different bird and these are the requirements and whatever. And sometimes when you're a librarian and you have a brand new teacher or whatever the case might be, sometimes there is no negotiating with what the assignment is. You just kind of go with it and you offer assistance as you can. That was this particular lesson. And we have a leadership development elective that they specifically choose students who maybe could use some skills in being a leader, or they could maybe use some additional support in certain things. And this particular teacher wanted the students to research leaders because this was a leadership development class. She wanted them to research leaders and the different things that made them leaders. They had just learned about qualities of leadership. So she wanted them to look at the biographies of these leaders, but through these different lenses. Fine, it's a bird project, but here we are. However, she said, here's the list of leaders I'd like them to research. Well, I said to her before I even looked at the list, I said, well, I want to make sure that the resources we're going to use, like that I can actually find resources on these people. And she was like, yeah, totally. Not married to the list at all. Totally married to this assignment, but the leaders list, I don't even care. Fine. So I looked at this list. This list was like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Stonewall Jackson. Like, not only old and dead, but very white and old and dead. And for the students in this class, no. Like, already this is an elective that most of them did not want to take, and this is just not going to be pretty. So I said to her, I said, I want to make this a little bit more modern and relevant. She said, please do. So what I did with this list was, I think there were like 25 kids in the class. So I made a list of like 35 leaders, and I included leaders across industries. I included Beyonce. I included Taylor Swift. I included comedians. I chose people that, current presidents. I included Joe Biden, but I also included people like Nelson Mandela, people like, that are super popular right now. And to see the looks on kids' faces when they saw the list. We gave them time to do some research because a lot of them didn't know who some of these people were. And as soon as they would search in our databases, they were like, oh, I know them, or, oh, hey, blah, blah, blah. And so it was great to be able to think about and have really impact on these leaders. Who are we acknowledging as leaders that these kids see as leaders? It's not necessarily military leaders or, historical leaders. It is right now leaders. And to be able to be inclusive in that way and to think about who's relevant to kids, but also across industries was really helpful. We included Elon Musk. We included Mark Zuckerberg. We included all of these different people that we knew kids knew, and some that they did not know. But it was really great to be able to have that impact on that one little part of the bird project that I could. That it was very inclusive, not only of culture, but also of time period and across industry, that it would kind of show a really great breadth of options.
My teachers do an assignment called the Time Person of the Year, but in this case, they use a list of civil rights leaders who in their time would have never been acknowledged as a Time Person of the Year. And then getting that sort of a persuasive argument as to why this person should be a Person of the Year. And again, looking at something like you did with this leadership research, or for us, it was Time Person of the Year, but trying to come at it from a way that students might find themselves more invested and connecting more with the content. So tell me about Fun Fridays.
This is the highlight of my month, Amy. I will tell you, I absolutely adore this. This is something that I came up with several years ago, and I know that a lot of schools have an ESOL class or an ESL class where it's the beginning English students. It is the ones that are still working on acquiring their English. They speak primarily another language, but this is the class that they're really working on developing those things like prepositions, like vocabulary, like learning about the culture of America, that kind of thing. And so this particular activity is called Fun Fridays. And I love this activity because it invites my beginning ESOL class to our makerspace. And they don't usually come to our makerspace on their own. Many of them cannot stay after school, so the makerspace clubs are not an option for them. But what I do is I talk to the current ESOL teacher and see what they're working on. And then from there, I try to design a makerspace lesson that allows them to work on that particular kind of language. So for example, there was a couple months ago that they were working on prepositions. And so we had a fun Friday. They have it last period of the day. So we scheduled it for a Friday where they had this class, and they got to come and learn some new vocab in the makerspace, like cup and tube and straw. These are words they still hadn't learned yet. So they were acquiring some makerspace vocabulary. But I also incorporated a lot of the visuals they had in their classroom, like behind and on top of or next to or whatever it was. We also talked about adjectives and how they relate to nouns, like the red cup or the short straw, whatever the case was. Students were put into pairs and they were given certain materials, and they were giving a testing divider so that the testing divider would go between them. And one person would build a thing with the stuff and then had to instruct the person on the other side of the testing divider how to create this thing. So it started with we gave them sentence starters. Put the red cup in the middle. Put the long tube in front of the red cup. And they had to do step by step so that when it was done, they lifted up the testing divider to see if they were the same. And sometimes they were the same, and sometimes they were really not the same. And so it was great because they would laugh and, or it was great success that they built the same thing. And then they would take it apart and the other partner got to do the same thing. So they were incorporating the vocab they were learning in class. They got to spend time in the makerspace, interact with makerspace materials, and they were also really working on that collaboration because, like Stacy said, not a lot of them share the same language. So it's kind of an awkward class because the only language that is common for them is English. But they have a ton of fun. We have done a lot of different activities. We have done those. Do you remember when we did those fortune tellers as kids? Okay, we taught them how to do fortune tellers once and trying to do the origami. And then the teacher helped with what words were on the inside so that the kids had to either point and say it or they had to spell it, depending on what they needed. And then, you know how we would lift up the flap and it would be some question or whatever it was? She came up with conversation questions. So it was like, what is your favorite season? And the other kid would say, my favorite season is blank. So it was giving them conversation opportunities, but in the atmosphere of the makerspace, in a lesson that they would not have gotten in any other place. So in that instruction, I'm making my spaces available, but I'm kind of reinventing what their conversation looks like.
So I'm for a visual friend, at least in my growing up, those were called cootie catchers.
Yes.
So cootie catchers, and you with your fingers, and you'd pinch them apart. And I will include link in the show notes. Stacy, tell me, how have you incorporated inclusivity into your instruction?
Well, first off, having to follow Rachel's Fun Fridays is pretty evil. So thanks a lot for that.
I'm sorry. That's how we wrote the outline.
I know. Also, Fun Fridays, like I always love hearing the stories afterwards when she comes home with, hey, this is what we got to do today. Always super jealous. So some things that we have done for instruction, I have tried to partner up with our math department to do something for Fibonacci Day as well. Pi Day is very library centric. We do our active program for that. But Fibonacci Day is November 23rd. It is 1123. The Fibonacci sequence is the one where You add the 2 digits previous to get the next number. So 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 2 = 3. 2 + 3 = 5. That's the Fibonacci sequence. And it appears in nature very often, and in a few, in art and in architecture and in a load of different ways. So I built this whole stations activity that any of our math teachers, 7 to 12, could pull out. And it also kind of works out that November 23rd often is right around Thanksgiving break. And so, hey, teachers, if you're looking for something that, you don't want to start something new right before there's going to be this long weekend, how about you do something for Fibonacci Day? And not every teacher does it. We've hosted it in the library a few times. Sometimes teachers just want to do it in their rooms. Like I said, completely optional. But it has been a really nice way to offer some resources for our math teachers and also offer some fun for our students while in math class and connect to real world math, which is so hard to do a lot of times. But it's just a fun kind of let's explore math in this real world kind of way for everybody.
Your math department must love having a librarian with so much math background. I love that.
I hope they appreciate me. I'm kidding. If anyone's listening, I love you.
So tell me about, you have African American History, a maker project that you do?
Yeah, so this just happened a few months ago. Our African American History class is an elective, but it's an elective open to any high schooler, so grades 9 to 12. And it's just kind of like an extra social studies credit for them. And so because it is such an open-ended class, open to anyone, that you have a wide variety of abilities and interests and all kinds. And so the teacher reached out to me at the beginning of the year that she would really love to do something in our makerspace. We talked about it a little bit, and she was talking about how they were starting this project about different aspects of Afro-Caribbean culture, specifically Puerto Rican, like Afro-Puerto Rican culture. And it's like, I know nothing about that, but I'm about to learn, right? That's one of the best things about being a librarian, is that anything that we don't know, we get to learn about. And what a blessing that is, right? Come to find out, there is this artist that they learned about as part of their unit who does historical markers around Puerto Rico, but not just kind of our U.S., or mainland U.S. historical markers that are, let's be honest, very boring looking, built for the elements, but not exactly for visual interest, shall we say. Whereas this artist, it is the opposite. His historical markers are really like mini tributes to whatever person or thing the historical marker is for. And it is never the same format, like all of our historical markers basically looks the same, the same shape and made of the same materials. And that is not true for his. It's almost like each one is its own mini sculpture in tribute to this person. And like, that's it. You know what? These kids are going to pick a particular aspect to research. She did the research part in her class. And then they came to the makerspace and they built the historical marker in tribute to their thing, a la the artist, who I do not remember the artist's name off the top of my head. I am so sorry. But the kids built these just amazing things in tribute to their person or their kind of cultural aspect that just blew me away. And so since then, they have been on display in the library. That has been very fun to be able to have this very official looking kind of art exhibit of their work. They had to write an artist statement. They had to write a summary of their learning. We embedded reflection and kind of metacognition throughout the process. And it was just so fun that they got to choose what to research, also to work as a group to do that problem solving and critical thinking of what they wanted their historical marker to look like. And also that it was this component of American culture that we so rarely hear about. I mean, or I guess I should only speak from my experience growing up in the Southeast, that we didn't hear much about Puerto Rican history, much less Afro-Puerto Rican history, right? So, and then to be able to have that out so all of our students have access to that and to see that and to learn a little bit has been just wonderful.
Well, and I think it goes without saying that oftentimes another easy way to include or to create the sense of inclusivity is to remember that our space can be that sort of place where we showcase the student work. And I know I've always been excited to invite that student work into our space to display if we have rather, sort of communal spaces where other people could enjoy our students' projects, shine a light on our students in all the different things they do. So one last suggestion about probability and statistics in your library program.
Yes. Okay. So I promise I did not set out to just talk about all the stuff we do for the math teachers. I promise. It just kind of worked out. So this project was part of our probability and statistics math elective. The teacher wanted to do something around sports statistics. So I helped him build this whole project, and the students were going to choose a sport, and they needed to choose independent and dependent variables and make hypotheses, and this whole project around the statistics around sports. And what I loved the most about it was that, yes, we were supporting a math teacher, and we were getting math in the library, which was great, and a department that it can be hard to figure out how we can support them sometimes. But what was more important to me was that we were also supporting our sports kids, right? Our kids that their entire world is whatever team they're on or whatever team they support, or, they're the biggest fan of blank. And this was an opportunity for us to support some of those kids, right? The kids that just happen to be taking that class, but still it was a chance for library to be supporting the sports kids who, they got to choose what they wanted to research. They were incorporating that in and looking at it through a math lens, but it was all through the library. And so, I don't know a lot about what we call sport ball in my library because none of us tend to be sports people. But I do appreciate when we can find those opportunities to support them and to have those kids know that we love and support them in their passions as well.
I was very excited because this year kicked off the very first year. We had one of our new teachers design a sports literature class, and it's a semester-long class, and it is hugely popular already. In its second semester, it's being taught, but I was able to carve out some of my budget to support the sports literature, and it really has given us an opportunity to introduce a lot of students to an aspect of literature that, if it wasn't in the library, well, I'm starting to buy those books now, and I have a direct line to this teacher, and we are now supporting each other. He's upping my checkout stats, and I'm making sure that we create entire sections devoted to things that his students want to read. Stacy and Rachel, you are incredibly generous with your time and your expertise and all of these wonderful ideas. I have my own list of things I can't wait to incorporate into my program, and especially the ones that, won't actually cost much money at all, just some of my time and just being clever and reaching out to those teachers and tapping those interests that we can support them in. I'm sure listeners are out there who would like to follow you on your social media platforms of your preference. Would you please let us know where we can best connect with you? Because I know that everybody has their favorites. Yes, Rachel, tell us, what do you do when it comes to social media so that we can make sure to follow you?
Well, I am currently exclusively on Blue Sky. My account is still active on Twitter. You can totally scroll through what has been shared there. There's a lot of really great stuff there. I do not post there anymore, but it is there as an archive. But you can find me active on Blue Sky. and primarily by email. I'm great with email. And so if you have any questions or you want to know more, really email is the best place. But Blue Sky exclusively at rgrove1013.
Excellent. And how about you, Stacy?
My problem is I am trying to thread the needle between which social media platforms are going to survive this weird moment we are in technologically. So to that end, right now, I'm trying to play the field and keep basically all of my accounts as active as I can. I'm doing a lot of cross-posting. So I apologize to anyone who follows me on more than one platform because you're seeing everything like multiple times, and I apologize. But I am Mama Gilb's Lib on X, used to be Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. I am just Mama Gilbs on Blue Sky. My library also has an Instagram and an X account that I do try to keep up and, still be spreading the word about what's happening in the library. So yeah, you're welcome to follow me on any of those. Just know that if you pick more than one, then you're going to see some content twice. And I'm sorry, but I'm playing the field.
Absolutely. And friends, you're always welcome to reach out to me. And I am regularly communicating to our guests by, and sharing those messages with you. It is not unusual when somebody reaches out to me and says, "Oh my gosh, you did this episode. Could you get me in contact with this person?" I do that all the time. And it's not sort of a talent scout. We're going to reach out and just connect our talent with our listening audience. Friends, you are wonderful, and I wish you have a fantastic rest of the year. And thank you so much for sharing your time today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Amy.
If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really enjoyed today's conversation, reach out and thank Rachel and Stacy. A couple friendly reminders, friends. Use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more, and librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. ISTE 24 is being held in Denver this summer. You don't want to miss the school library playground. The deadline for submitting a proposal to showcase your ideas has been extended. Visit the link in today's show notes for more information. Join us for our next book club when we read Jared Amato's brand new book, Just Read It. And finally, I hope you will consider sending in your voice message in Have Your Say. Visit the link in today's show notes for details. The topic of our next episode will be Let's Roll, RPGs in Our Libraries, and my conversation with Lucas Maxwell. I hope you will tune in.